Chapter 4 Mystery Yarn. One fall afternoon, Homer was whistling a little tune and raking up leaves from Uncle Ulysses' front lawn and trying to decide whether to ask for his pay in cash or in donuts from Uncle Ulysses' lunchroom. He just finished raking the leaves into a neat pile at the curb and was about to go find a match when the sheriff turned the corner in his car. "Hi, Sheriff, do you have a match?" shouted Homer. "Sure thing, Homer," said the sheriff as his car jerked to a stop. "That's a right smart pile of leaves you got there. Burning leaves. Sure smells nice, don't they?" he said as he struck a match on his seat and lit the pile. "Yep, Sheriff, and burning leaves always makes me think of football and school," said Homer. "And the county fair," added the sheriff. "That'll be along in a couple of weeks. I'm going to exhibit my chickens again this year. My white leghorns took a blue ribbon last fall." "Well, I'll be seeing you, Homer," added the sheriff. Then he flicked a bit of an ash off his sleeve because he had his best Sunday suit on, climbing into his car, and drove to the end of the block. Homer watched while the sheriff got out of his car, straightened his tie, and started up Miss Terwilliger's front steps. Miss Terwilliger, as anyone from Cinderburg can tell you, is one of the town's best-known and best-loved citizens. She runs knitting classes and in years past has taught almost every woman in Cinderburg how to knit. She is a familiar sight on Sundays, holidays, and at social functions, dressed in a robin's egg blue dress which she had knit years ago when she first started her knitting classes. In fact, Sundays and holidays did not seem complete without Miss Terwilliger in her robin egg blue dress. She might think that a dress so old would look worn and out of style, but not Miss Terwilliger's. After church or after a party, she changes into a house dress of simple cotton print and carefully hangs her favorite blue knit in a closet to save it for the next occasion. The matter of style doesn't bother her. If short skirts are the latest thing, she merely unravels a few inches from the bottom and the dress looks like the latest thing. Of course, she saves the robin egg blue yarn that she removes, for as she has often remarked, longer skirts will be in style again in a year or two, and then I'll have the right yarn to knit and a few inches back onto the bottom of the skirt. Miss Terwilliger is a very clever woman, and besides being an established knitter, she is a wonderful cook. Her fried chicken is famous for miles around Cinderburg. It is only natural for such a woman to have many admirers, and two special ones, the sheriff and Homer's uncle, Temecula. As long as Homer could remember, the sheriff had gone every Thursday, and Uncle Temecula had gone every Sunday to call on Mrs. Terwilliger and eat a chicken dinner. And it was no secret that both the sheriff and Uncle Temecula wanted to marry her. She liked them both, but somehow she couldn't seem to make up her mind. Homer remembered that he had another job for this afternoon, so he poked the fire some more to make it burn faster. When the fire was out, Homer put away the rake and hurried off to Uncle Temecula's house. Homer's Uncle Telly, lived all by himself in a trim little house near the railroad. Homer's mother always said it's a shame that Uncle Telly had to live alone because he would make an ideal husband for some fine woman like Mrs. T. Aunt Aggie would always answer, "But I don't know how any fine woman could put up with his carryings-on." By carryings-on, Aunt Aggie meant Uncle Telly's hobby of collecting string. Yes, Uncle Telly was a string saver, and he had saved string for years. He had quite a lot of it, too, and every Thursday afternoon he would take all of his pieces of string that he had collected during the week and wind them on a huge ball out in the garage. That was one of Homer's jobs on Thursdays, helping Uncle Telly wind string, because Uncle Telly had had a bit of rheumatism of late. You see, the ball of string was getting too large to wind without a lot of stooping and reaching. Uncle Telly greeted Homer at the door. "Hello, Homer, we've got a lot to wind today." "That's good, Uncle Telly. I brought a few pieces from home, too." They went out to the garage, and as Uncle Telly looked at his ball of string, he said with pride, "Another 1/4 inch, and it'll be 6 feet across." biggest ball of string in the world. Well, I don't know, Uncle Telly, said Homer. Freddie's been helping the sheriff wind his string down at the jail, and he says the sheriff's ball of string is about 6 feet across, too. Huh. I've heard tell that the sheriff winds his string loose, so the ball looks bigger. Mine's wound tight, said Uncle Telly, poking the ball, and it's a lot longer than the sheriff's ball of string ever'll be. Yep, I guess you're right, said Homer, and he began winding the string while Uncle Telly tied the pieces together in double knots. Wind it tight, reminded Uncle Telly. Don't let anybody say that my string isn't wound right. I'll have none of this loose, sloppy sheriff kind of winding on my ball of string. Just as Homer and Uncle Telly was about finishing, there was a knock on the garage door, and when Uncle Telly opened the door, there stood the sheriff and Judge Shank. Good day, Temecula, said Judge. Howdy, Telly, said the sheriff, trying to peer over Uncle Telly's shoulder and see the ball of string. Howdy, Judge, said Uncle Telly, and scowling at the sheriff, he said, I don't expect you'd be calling on me on Thursday afternoon. Uh-huh, Temecula, said the judge. I just happened to stop in the knitting shop to drive my wife home when I met the sheriff. As you know, Telly, it is necessary to cut down on expenses at the fair this year, and we cannot afford to have the trotting races that we have always had. The sheriff, who, like myself, is on the fair board, and who, like yourself, is a string saver, has suggested that he and you, Temecula, enter into the event that could be held on the racetrack and provide the diversion that the trotting races have. Yep, interrupted the sheriff. I challenge you to unroll your string around the racetrack just to prove once and for all that I've got more string than you have. Yes, to put it bluntly, that is a situation, Temecula. I appeal to your sense of county pride. Do not spurn the offer, and then, of course, the winner will receive a prize. I'll do it, by Zeus, said Uncle Telly. We'll see who's got the most string, Sheriff. Your ball might be just as big as mine, but it ain't wound tight. And to prove his point, Uncle Telly gave his ball a kick and almost lost his balance. Very well, gentlemen, said the judge. I shall... Wait a minute, Judge, interrupted Uncle Telly. I mean, I'll do it on one condition. Uncle Telly was noted for driving a hard bargain, and Homer wondered just what that would be. If I win this here contest, the sheriff has to promise to spend his Thursday afternoons out of town and give Miss Terwilliger a chance to make up her mind to marry me. Well, said the sheriff, in that case, if I win, you'll have to leave town on Sundays and give her a chance to make up her mind to marry me. It's a deal, said Uncle Telly, and he and the sheriff shook hands for the first time in years, just to cinch the bargain, of course. Very well, gentlemen, crooned the judge. I shall judge this contest, and at the earliest convenience we shall draw up a set of rules pertaining. Good day, Temecula. Goodbye, Telly, said the sheriff. Sorry I can't stay, but I got an appointment. Uncle Telly slammed the door on the sheriff and went back to tying knots. We'll see, he said, and pulled the next knot so hard that he broke the string. Golly, Uncle Telly, said Homer, that's going to be a swell contest. I hope you win the prize. Huh. Prize or no prize, we'll see who's got the most, said Uncle Telly, and Miss Terwilliger will get a chance to make up her mind. That woman certainly can cook, sighed Uncle Telly with a dreamy look. Then he busied himself with his knots and said, Now, mind you, Homer, wind it tight. In the Friday night edition of the Centerburg Bugle, Homer read a long article on the county fair and a special announcement about the contest to determine the world's champion string saver, and then the rules that Judge Shank had drawn up. Each contestant may appoint an assistant to help with the maneuvering of his ball of string. The balls of string shall be unwound, i.e. rolled around the county fair track in a counterclockwise direction, starting from the judge's booth in front of the main grandstand. The ball of string reaching around the racetrack the greatest number of times shall be regarded as the winning string, and that string's owner shall be declared winner of the prize and of the title of World Champion String Saver. The string shall be unwound for 2 hours every afternoon of the week of the fair, starting at 2 o'clock. Homer read the rules and noticed that nothing was mentioned about the gentleman's agreement between the sheriff and Uncle Telly, but that sort of news travels fast in a town that size of Centerburg. And it wasn't long before practically everybody knew that the winner was supposed to have the hand of Miss Terwilliger's in marriage. Homer decided to go past Uncle Telly's house and see what he thought about the rules. Homer couldn't help wondering what a woman who could cook fried chicken so well and who was as clever as Mrs. Terwilliger would do if she heard about the agreement. Homer found Uncle Telly trying to figure out how many miles of string were wound on the ball. He was multiplying 3.1416 by the diameter, and after multiplying by several figures, he asked Homer how many feet in a mile. 5,280, said Homer. Then Uncle Telly multiplied by 4. Then he turned to Homer and said, I figure there's enough string to go around that racetrack 100 times. Yep, 25 miles of string. Just let the sheriff beat that if he can. Look, Uncle Telly. Here comes the judge and the sheriff again, and look who's with him, Miss Terwilliger. Uncle Telly opened the door, and before the judge had a chance to knock, and the judge puffed in, followed by Sheriff and Miss Terwilliger. Puff, ha, good day, ha. Temecula's, ha. We have a new contestant for the title of World Champion String Saver, puffed the judge. Miss Terwilliger blushed and giggled while Uncle Telly backed around to the other side of the room and raised his eyebrows at the sheriff in a way that asked, Did you tell her about the agreement? The sheriff shrugged his shoulders and wiggled his mustache that showed he was just as puzzled as Uncle Telly. Miss Terwilliger, if she did not know about the agreement, wasn't admitting it. Isn't it wonderful, she said to Uncle Temecula and the sheriff, that we have so much in common? Yes, she twittered. I've been saving string for the past 15 years. All the colored yarn and odds and ends from knitting classes. I have a beautiful ball of yarn, all colors of rainbow. Splendid, said the judge, rubbing his hands together. Simply splendid. But, Judge, interrupted Uncle Telly anxiously, do you think, said the sheriff, nudging the judge and winking frantically, that a woman should enter into a thing of this sort? Splendid, continued the judge, ignoring the interruptions. The American female is beginning to find her rightful place in the business and public life of the nation. The sheriff and Telly and I deeply appreciate your public spirits, Miss Terwilliger, and I'm sure that the county fair will be an unprecedented success. Come, Judge, said Miss Terwilliger with a smile. I must get back to my knitting shop. Goodbye, Sheriff. Goodbye, Telly. I'll see you on Sunday. After the judge and Miss Terwilliger was gone, the sheriff and Uncle Telly each accused the other of telling about the agreement. They finally calmed down and decided that the judge had double-crossed them with his fancy speech about women's rights. But Uncle Telly, said Homer, there couldn't be 3 balls of string in the world as large as yours and the sheriff's. You're wrong, son, said the sheriff with a sigh. Her ball of string's bigger than mine. She's a clever woman, son, a very clever woman. If she wins, said Uncle Telly gloomingly, we'll be right back where we started, waiting forever for her to make up her mind. During the next week, the whole county got excited about the contest to determine the world's champion string saver. Everybody started saving string for their favorite contestant. The ladies in Miss Terwilliger's knitting class reported that Miss Terwilliger was knitting a brand new dress for an occasion. When Homer's mother heard this, she called Aunt Aggie and said, we should do something about Uncle Telly. You know how men are about clothes. They can hardly tell one dress or suit from another. The next day they dragged Uncle Telly downtown and picked out a nice, new, and very becoming plaid suit for him. The sheriff said if they're going to make a fashion show out of this thing, I can dress up too. He sent away several special delivery to Chicago and ordered expertly fashioned double-breasted Hollywood model suit. On the day before the fair started, Homer went up to Miss Terwilliger with the sheriff to see them take her ball of string out of the house. Miss Olson, the carpenter, had to take out the side of the house because the ball just wouldn't go through the door. When the moving men rolled it out and onto the truck, the sheriff said, "That's a pretty ball of string and I've ever seen. It's got a a woman's touch." Just then, Uncle Telly walked up and agreed. "It's awful pretty, being all colors of the rainbow, but it ain't wound tight. It's so soft you can poke your fist right into it." "Yes, but yarn stretches pretty much," said the sheriff unhappily. The day the fair opened, the grandstand were crowded, and people stood halfway around the track with the contestants and their assistants started unrolling their string. Miss Terwilliger's new pink dress and the sheriff's and Uncle Telly's new suit caused much favorable comment from the ladies present. The men were more interested in the string, but as Homer's mother said, they can hardly tell one dress or suit from another. Miss Terwilliger and the sheriff and Uncle Telly was hot and tired about the first 2 times around the track, and so were their assistants. So the judge had some of the regular county fair employees roll the ball while the contestants rode around the track alongside the sheriff's car. After the first afternoon's unrolling, Miss Terwilliger's ball measured 5 foot 9 inches. The sheriff's measured 5 foot 8 3/4 inches, and Uncle Telly's measured 5 feet 8 inches. Uncle Telly and the sheriff were very uneasy. At the end of the second day, the sheriff and Miss Terwilliger's 5 foot, Uncle Telly's 4 and 11 inches. Uncle Telly felt a little better, and so did the sheriff. The measurements at the end of the next day of the fair were Uncle Telly and the sheriff running 16.5 inches, and Miss Terwilliger only 12 and 5/8, and each contestant's ball of string had unrolled around the track 99 times. Uncle Telly and the sheriff were feeling pretty confident at each of their... I'm sorry, I lost my place. Uncle Telly and the sheriff were feeling pretty confident now, and each one was sure of winning the title of Woman's Champion String Saver in the hand of the clever Miss Terwilliger. On the last day of the contest, everybody in Center County was on hand early. The contestants were going to roll their balls of string around the track themselves. The sheriff and Uncle Telly were all dressed up for the occasion, but Miss Terwilliger was not wearing her new knit dress. The ladies noticed right away that she was wearing the old Robin's egg blue, one that she had saved all these years. She started off carrying her ball in a gay little basket and a parasol to protect her from the autumn sun. She marched right off at 2 o'clock with her string trailing behind her. Most everybody knew that Miss Terwilliger's ball was 3 3/8 inches less across than the sheriff's or Uncle Telly's, and they admired her confidence and her spirit, but they all knew that she couldn't win. Uncle T and the sheriff even felt confident they were taking it slow. They watched each other like hawks, and they unwound their string right up against the fence and checked up on each other's knots. They hadn't even gotten a quarter of the way around when Miss Terwilliger was at the halfway mark. Homer could see her walking right along, wearing her robin's egg blue dress with pink trim at the bottom, carrying her basket and the parasol to protect her from the autumn sun. The sheriff and Telly were halfway around, still checking every knot and stretching their string as tight as they dared against the fence. Now Miss Terwilliger was 3/4 of the way around, still walking right along, wearing her robin's egg blue blouse with a pink skirt, carrying her basket and the parasol to protect her from the autumn sun. Uncle Telly shouted at the 3/4 mark, "I've won!" The sheriff wound his string around a walnut. "Mine's solid to the core." Everybody started shouting, "Hooray for Telly! Hooray for Telly, the world's champion string saver!" And after the noise had died down, people heard another shout, "I've won!" And then they noticed for the first time that Miss Terwilliger was standing right down in front of the grandstand, wearing her dress with a robin egg blue trim at the neck and sleeves, holding her basket and the parasol to protect her from the autumn sun. The judge puffed down to where Miss Terwilliger was and held up the end of her string and shouted, "I pronounce you the winner of the title, string-saving champion of the world." Then everybody started cheering for Miss Terwilliger. Uncle Ulysses and the sheriff trudged up and congratulated her and told her how glad they were that she had won the championship. Everyone could see though, that they were unhappy about having to wait forever to make up her mind, for her to make up her mind, especially Uncle Telly. Practically every woman who was there that day knew how the clever Miss Terwilliger had won the championship. They enjoyed it immensely and laughed among themselves. But they didn't give away the secret because they thought all's fair in the love. And besides, a woman ought to be allowed to make her own mind up. There might have been a few very observing men who liked Homer and knew how she won, but they didn't say anything either, or maybe they just didn't get around to mentioning it before Miss Terwilliger finally decided to marry Uncle Telly the following week. It was a grand wedding, and with the sheriff as best man. Uncle Temecula and his new wife left for Niagara Falls, while the guests at the reception were still drinking punch and eating wedding cake and donuts, not to mention fried chicken. That was a wandy wedding. I mean a dandy wedding, said the sheriff to Homer while polishing off a chicken breast. He looked at the wishbone and sighed. Then after a minute he brightened and said, "But they've asked me to dinner every Thursday night." "You know, Homer," said the sheriff with a smile, "they'll be a very capable couple. I mean happy couple, going through life saving string together." "Yep," said Homer. "I guess they're the undisputed champions now." "Guess you're right, Homer. Nobody'll ever get so much string saved on one ball as they have. Heck, I think I'll start saving paper bags or bottle caps." The end.